Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm back in the studio today working with my gel prints on the series that I've been working on, which is gel print art. If you are just joining me for the very first time, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and click on subscribe and then the little bell and you'll receive a notification when I post the next video. This will be video number 18 in the series, and there is a link to the playlist down in the description for the entire series. So there are a couple of older videos in that gel print playlist, but starting with EP1, I start a specific series on using gel prints for different art projects. So in the last video, I had to kind of take a step back and show you a couple of ways to make gel prints and have them be washable. Some of the upcoming projects that I'm going to be working on will require washable fabric. And so if you have not watched that, it's the previous episode. The one before that, I had created this little art journal that I have now started playing in. And it was done with fabrics that were not washable. But today's video is going to involve making some little beads for little dangles on your journals or to use in whatever way you want. So before I get to that, this will be a pretty quick tutorial. It's pretty simple. But before I get to that, I have a question for you, and I hope you will leave me your answer down in the comments. In a few videos ago, I had made buttons and a lot of other little accessories, some little ponytail holders and different things. And so I am almost completely sold out of the buttons. I think I only have one set left. And so I have a question. When I did the buttons, I made them with a shank style button because for me, when I started making buttons, I made them to put on neck warmers, and I liked that type of button that didn't have any holes on the front to kind of mess up my artwork. So I had been making them with the shank. Now, for journals, if you want to use them for a closure on a junk journal, you might want it with holes. So my question for you is shank style or with holes, knowing that it would kind of interrupt the artwork. And this is I have a whole batch here that I've started, some large hearts, some larger circles that I may put a pin back on. I had done some like that, and I like that because then you can also pin it, attach it to your journal that way. But this journal, I actually made it with a brad. So I took my little brad and put that on the back instead of a shank or the holes. And so my question for you is, do you like that? If you're going to use them for journals, it just makes it super easy to install because you just add, punch a hole in your journal cover, and then it gives you a nice little offset to wrap whatever. In this case, I used elastic, but if you had ribbon or anything, you would have room for that. So doing this, it's very sturdy on there. It's not moving because I actually put a piece of tape and then it's glued down with this inside cover, so it's really on there well. So let me know in the comments, because I'm working on a new batch that will go into my Etsy shop. So let me know, shank, holes, brads, or even a pin back. I probably wouldn't put a pin back on the smaller ones because they're too small, but on the larger ones I can put that, little pin back. Okay, so that's that question, and I will get to work on those. Today's video, though, is going to be about making beads. And I think a long time ago, these are done with paper, with hand-painted papers. So they're nice and colorful. But I needed to make more because I think I used them all and actually had to make a few more just to do that dangle. So I thought, I'm going to do them with some different things. Some paper, sometimes you have things that maybe didn't turn out the way you had hoped. And so I did a little bit of experimenting, and it's kind of a way to use up materials that you might not otherwise like. So I wanted to just show you how I did it. I did a bunch of these are with fabric then too, just for a difference. So this one, I think this one's with fabric too. All these are with fabric. I think I did a whole bunch of different ones. This one is with paper. So you can kind of, with the fabric ones, you get that extra grain, you see the grain of the fabric. And if you like, little tatty, little ratty edges where the threads are coming out, you can leave those on. So I had previously done them, like I said, with paper, and you can use them for all kinds of things. I had made a little bracelet out of this one that's real colorful and, I like to wear. So, but I wanted to get a new stash of beads. I needed to replenish. So that's what I'm going to also work on while I have my resin out. Now, I actually saw someone do this in a different way, and I'm not going to remember who it is. She did her beads with actually gluing them to a straw and then cutting the straw off, and then you have this tube that's permanently inside. And it's one way to do it, so I guess I'm mentioning it because I do mine using a skewer. This is just a bamboo skewer that I keep a bunch of these on hand and just sitting here all the time. And that way, if I have a scrap of paper, I can go ahead and use it up right then and have some beads going like I do here on this one. So even though I haven't resined these yet, as I have little scraps, I just go ahead and make my bead and then I have it. So you can, whatever you have, maybe you have a little skewer or this is just a little skinny, one of the little skinny straws like for coffee. So either one of those can work. You do them in a little bit different of a way, and I'm going to share with you that because you're going to, again, use what you have. I do like the size of this for 2 beads. You could use something skinnier if you have something skinnier, but just remember that whatever size of little thing, if you were to be using an end of a paintbrush or something, that's going to be the size of your hole on your bead. And I don't mind them being a little large like this, which is the size of my skewer, because I like to sometimes put them on leather or, have something thicker cording or something on it. And if it's this big of a hole and say this skinny of an elastic, you just pop another bead on there and you kind of cover up that hole, so it's kind of a versatile size to use a skewer. So same with the straw. I think they're actually very similar in size. The straw might be just a tiny bit smaller. Okay, so what you want to do, I'm doing these with fabric, and if you're going to do them on the skewer, you don't want them to be stuck to the skewer because you're going to be pulling them off. If you're doing them on a straw, you can do it either way. You can have it be glued to the straw so that you just snip it off and leave that plastic insert inside your bead, or in that case, you would glue it to the straw so that it stays in there. Or if you want to remove it like I do with the skewer, you would not glue it to the straw. So I'm going to show you how I did that both ways, I guess. So if I'm going to take my piece, I like to work with doing different sizes, and this is why I wanted to show you how to make your fabric washable. Now, you could do this with non-washable fabric, but we are going to be getting it wet with the resin and with glue. So if it was not washable, it might all kind of smear together. And then the other thing that I should mention is if you sealing it, and we'll do that versus not sealing it, I believe these were with the same fabric, and you can see how these are darker, which are okay. You wouldn't, if you didn't know, you wouldn't have known. But if you want your color to be vibrant, you need to seal it before you put the resin on, because it just kind of soaks in there and it just made the colors come out darker. So you're going to start with, whether you're working with paper or fabric, you're going to start with a piece, and I'm using, you see some stripy ones that are different colors throughout, and that gets you all that colorful difference in your bead. If you were to use something that was more solid like this is actually some scraps from the inside fabric that I used on my journal. I just had a couple little scraps left, and so this bead was made from that fabric. So you can use a solid but you're going to end up with a solid bead. It had a little bit of pattern on it. You can kind of see the little bit of pattern on it, but it's really subtle. So if you have something like this, had 2 colors, this was probably a scrap from one of my gel prints. Some of these that are more solid, again, scraps from my gel printed fabric. But if you do something stripy like this with more colors throughout the length of your piece, you're going to get more interest, because when we roll it up, this will be on the inside and this will be on the outside on top of this. So I'm going to take, I think, and just use a glue stick and maybe something to work against here. Now, if you're going to do it where you want to cut off the straw and leave the straw, you want your glue to go all the way to the end so that it kind of glues itself to the straw. So you could just glue this whole bit on and just start at the end. So the width from your widest point is going to be the length of your bead. So you're just going to start wrapping that. Now, I end up with one has a straight side instead of being two sides that are angled. So you just kind of have to finesse it so that it's even. And you can use, if you don't want to use glue stick, you can use PVA glue. We just want to kind of get this in a spot where it stays. Now, this piece of fabric, the length of the fabric is going to determine the thickness of our bead. So if you see that, the length, this measurement here is the length of my bead, and the length of this is going to determine how big around that bead is. So if I used longer strips and kept going, my bead would be bigger around in the center here and just tapered more. So you can vary them up. You can have them be whatever you want. But that's basically what we're going to do, is just do that. And then in this case, I've glued it to the straw, so it's not going to come off. I will end up cutting this off with scissors when I'm finished and can separate them that way. So that's one way to do it. And then on my skewer, you're going to see the difference. Let's use one that's maybe a little bit different colors. Now, I don't want it to be stuck to my skewer. I want to be able to pull it off. So I'm going to start it with no glue so that I don't have anything glued to my skewer. And actually, I can go ahead and maybe put glue down here. Will make it easier for me. So that top inch or so does not have glue. And then you're just going to kind of as tight as you can start it. And now it's gluing to the fabric's gluing to itself because I've put glue, on the rest of it. And just stuck that down. So you can see this is a longer bead because my beginning was wider. And then you can see that by having all those different colors and it tapering, you're getting to see from the beginning all those different layers of color, and it just makes it really interesting, okay? So you're going to make up a bunch of those, and this one you can see it will slide off and on. So I would do that with all of these. So some of them, I tried to make them varied in size this way. So I'll have some long ones and some shorter ones. So I'll get those all loaded up onto here, but I'm going to go ahead and show you the next little step here. And I think on this, I did do this after the fact. So this one was a fabric one as well. And one thing that you can do is when you're to this point, we're going to seal it with some, you can use like gel medium, matte gel medium, or even PVA glue, anything like that, just to seal this before we add the resin. And that way it'll keep these colors nice and bright. So I'm going to just use, because I have it sitting right here. Actually, let me use this. So you could either use, this is matte gel or the matte medium. And I'm just going to put a little bit in this lid. And you can use a brush or you can even use your finger. It's not a big deal. So I'm just going to do this and seal this whole thing. So the nice thing is this is washable, so it's not smearing my ink. If I had just printed this off the printer like I've done before without making it washable, your ink is going to just kind of all run together and you're going to end up with kind of a dark, muddy mess. So that's why I wanted to do that last video about making your fabric washable. So then I'm just going to let this dry. And I want to show you one other thing. Let's see, maybe get some on this one. So that it's nice and sealed. So we'll let those dry. The other thing that you can do is if you had sort of a boring bead and you wanted it to have more color like this one, is I actually took my paint pen, and you can do this after, on top of this glue if you want, or before, either way, as long as it's not, if your ink that you use are water soluble, you'll just wipe it off. So I used black Posca pen and then my white gel pen and just made little dots around my bead just to give it a little bit more interest. So it kind of has lamp work beads, if you're familiar with lamp work beads, the glass blown beads. It kind of has that sort of look to it, but it's just made with fabric and some paint pens. So if you have a boring one, you can do stripes on it or, whatever you want just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. So assuming these were dry, then I can go on to the next step, which is my resin. And for that, I'm going to use UV resin. Now, if you don't have resin, you could use clear nail polish, or maybe you have a gloss medium, something like that. You can use gloss medium and it would make it that nice shiny. To me, making it the nice shiny makes it nice and feel sealed and like an actual bead, rather than having it be fabric. Now, if you want to leave them more organic and matte and not shiny, you could just coat them, maybe a few more coats with, a glue or Mod Podge or some kind of sealer, anything you want to get them just so they harden up. I'm going to use resin. I think nail polish, if you did several coats, clear nail polish, something like that, then you get that once you take it off. This one's not as important because I'm leaving it on the straw, so it has structure to it. This one, once it came off of the skewer, would be kind of squishy because it's not hardened. So using the resin, doing a few coats of the resin will harden this. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my UV resin. I use Picasso brand, and there's a link in the description for all of the materials I've used in this entire series. So you should find it there. So I'm just going to put a little bit in that cup. And then you could use a paintbrush, or you could use the little silicone spreader thingies that come with it. And then you're just going to coat this. So a brush might be easier than this in this case. So let me grab a throwaway brush. So this is just kind of a cheap little craft brush. And then you can just kind of spin it as you go. So I didn't let this one dry completely, so it may not end up as bright, but we're going to find out. So you just roll that around. You would do the same with nail polish or anything else you decided to use. And this, I think, to get it to the kind of hardness that I liked, I think I did maybe 2 or 3 coats of this, because the first coat, when you have them sealed, it doesn't soak in like it normally would. So, 2 coats might be plenty as long as you seal it really well. Okay, so I'm just gonna do that, and then I can pop it into my little UV light, and I'm just gonna kind of straddle it on something so that it can sit there. And I will have to spin this, it's not gonna get all the sides. So I'll just kind of do that, and I'll go ahead and get this one ready. So they're really quick to make. They're just nice and colorful and fun. And when you do this, you want to make sure you don't accidentally glue it to your skewer. But I just load up a skewer with a bunch of beads, and then you can cure them all together. But I like the kind of organic look. I like them with paper too, but I kind of like also seeing those threads and seeing the raw edge of my fabric, where it kind of frays. So it's just kind of whatever look you're after. You could remove those if you don't like them. So there I have my bead, and then I'm just going to pop it in here and see. This one still has a tiny bit of tackiness to it, but it's because I need to spin it. So what I do is once I've loaded up a whole bunch, I'll just kind of put it under my light and spin it like this for 30 seconds or so, and then maybe just let it sit and rotate them or something while I'm working on them. So anyway, it's super easy to make some beads that you'll have for your stash for whatever projects that you're doing. So let's see how this one's looking. It's also still a little bit tacky, but let me get it in here again for a minute, and I'll go ahead and maybe put another coat on this one. So you can actually just have these made in a matter of minutes. You want your layer to be pretty thin. If you have it too thick, when you hold it under the resin, it might pull down to one side, and then you'll have like a little bump on it. So if you keep your layer thin and then spin it when it's first starting to cure, you'll have it be nice and even. And I know you can't see my little UV light. I've shown it in previous ones, and there's a link down in the description for it. But it's actually two pieces that you can separate and have a top. I like the light to go all the way around because a lot of times I'm doing things that have multiple sides that need to be curing at once. So just in that time, it's already, so let's see what this one's like. This one still is a little bit tacky too on the side that wasn't hitting the light. But you can see just a couple of coats, and it's going to look like a nice little ceramic sort of bead. So that's it. I'm going to make a bunch of those and finish working on my buttons just so that I can have a nice variety of beads to work with for some upcoming projects. So that's it for me today. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.